Hey everybody, it's David with No Chaser, and I'm kind of lounging, I guess. I don't know. I wanted to have like a different sort of setup for this video because this video is I don't know. It's a kind of an offshoot. Usually, I talk about addiction or alcoholism, drugs and drinking as kind of a whole, or mental health issues, things like depression. Usually, a broader range that there's something, regardless if you're an addict, alcoholic, suffering from depression, co-occurring, all that type of stuff. You can get something from it, but this one is a lot more specific. The last time I did one this specific was about weed, and if it's weed addiction's real, which it's always so controversial, but this one's a little bit more somber, and it was brought upon just into my mind because just last night I was at a recovery meeting, and there was a friend I hadn't seen in, had to be about 12 years. If not longer now that I'm trying to recall, but if you know a little bit about my story, I actually started off, I had drank, smoked a little weed, 13, 14. It was when I was 15 that I got addicted to opiates. It all started with Vicodin. That had like the big shift in my head of, the terrible aha moment of like, oh, this is what I want to do for like the rest of my life. And, it kind of progressed from like pills to Percocets. There's kind of this natural sort of progression if you don't get into heroin right away or anything like that. So did that, morphine, and then, it would be Oxycontin. And this is where you would be able to start like snorting it or then even shooting it, because it wouldn't be those pills like Vicodin or Percocet that have all the acetaminophen and the Tylenol and ibuprofen and stuff like that. And there was just kind of this natural progression. Every once in a while you get dilaudid and things like that, but there was kind of a group of us, me in high school, where we kind of formed some of these bonds, not like real friendship bonds or anything by any means. It was just connections you could have to try to find and get drugs, or at least get the drugs you were looking for cheaper. And I knew some of these guys. Some of these guys started out as actual friends that I knew from sports, or one from in the neighborhood, or certain circles of friends. I had my secondary life in high school where appeared to be a normal person, played sports and did okay in school and was sociable. And then, as like with any addiction or with drinking, anything, as time progresses, you get more and more isolated. You either get more with the drinking buddies or the drug buddies. And, I split away from this group, I would say, it was about a couple of friends, acquaintances, and then just connections, people I knew. And the guy I met last night, he was of the ilk of just kind of one of the people I knew. You see a lot because you're doing lots of drugs together. But, when we met last night, we talked about all the friends that had died from this sort of like opiate era, and I kind of got out of it because drinking was really what became my real deal, so to speak. But the thing is that we had some friends that had passed away due to opiate overdose. They'd at a certain point, you have to, like, your tolerance builds enough, you have to start shooting oxy. Some would get into heroin. From where we're at, kind of in the Midwest, it stuck with oxy. The heroin, you might as well do oxy, I guess. That's kind of like the consensus, at least at the time. But fentanyl, and this is what, this subject's about. Fentanyl was something I came across twice. It was about as... I'd come across it about as much as I'd come across like something like DMT or like peyote, not just acid or mushrooms. It was very rare, and it was so strange to us because, again, this wasn't like pre-internet days. This was like back in the Erowid days where you just go to blogs and you learn about drugs. And this fentanyl thing seemed crazy. When you describe it to someone you were trying to sell to, they just thought you were bullshitting them. It was just like, it's in micrograms. It's so potent that, like, it's in micrograms. And you're warning me about overdosing if I just do this with it, because it's like, fuck you. Like, no way it's that as potent as you say it is. And the times I came across in two ways. One was like the patches, where it'd be kind of like a nicotine patch. And then the other one was, I shit you not, a sucker, like a lollipop of a sense. It doesn't look like your normal lollipop, but it would be something that it was like a lozenge with a stick on it. And it just looked insane, we didn't really pay much mind to it. And I talked to a couple people about this, and especially I brought it up on the podcast I do, where one of the fans sent in a story about how he would smoke the gel from the patches and how insanely crazy and dangerous that could have been, of just ODing right away. We just didn't know anything about it. And the the reason I bring up the thing with how I met the friend is because there was this, and I may have mentioned this before, but there's this crazy sort of trajectory where, I had friends that all did these opiates. Some of us went our separate ways. Very few had any sort of long-term clean time or sobriety. The friend I met last night had 9 years of clean time. Unfortunately, he went back out. But some just, I had another friend that went on like the California sober, which is just, smoking weed. I mean, it's the true like epitome of harm reduction. I wouldn't say his life is awesome, but he's not where he was at before, at least as I know right now. But then many of them died. But many of them died. You could see the trend of them passing away. And like in total, the most recent funeral I went to, one friend name, I'll just go with the name Matt. His was about 6 months ago. He was probably the seventh one. And you could see this trajectory from this group of people of when fentanyl became more prevalent and then their deaths on that same scale. Again, really need to get like a dry erase board or a chart or something. But you could just see a complete correlation with when fentanyl was overdosed and when these guys that I knew started dying. I mean, I'm not saying anything obviously special to these guys. If anything, these guys are just a microcosm for the country and the drug community as a whole. But I go back to that time where I came across fentanyl. And I tried to do it because we had put on the patch. It didn't really do much. We didn't know what we were doing. And so I had considered taking the gel off the patch and then just like smoking it. And again, just touching the patch, like just doing all the stuff where I was just mere moments from overdosing, from death. It is so crazy to think about. It's crazy to think about people making drugs just as is. Like, just guys cooking up meth, just some dude like in a trailer out in Arkansas, just like putting together these like very volatile chemicals that you're going to smoke and ingest. It's even crazier to think about people cutting stuff and mixing with meth. You're just in some school bus, abandoned school bus out in Mexico, where a guy is some 17-year-old who's never been educated because he lives in with a gang. They're just talking about things of micrograms and cutting it with MDMA or with weed. And a lot of people don't understand why it's cut that way. It's cut that way because for the same reason I got addicted to opiates, fentanyl feels really, really good. So if you could get somebody hooked on that, it's kind of like in this way where you feed dogs like heartworm medications, where you wrap it in bologna and you feed them that way so they take the pill. It's kind of like an opposite of that, where there is something like weed that they kind of just want, or cocaine or something, but then you hide something really good, which would be like the bologna in this case. This is a terrible analogy, but you hide this thing in there to where it takes hold of them, and then they want to buy from you more. Some people I know would stamp regular pills with fentanyl. So they'd actually stamp what was supposed to be Vicodin, or they would create, hydrocodone pills, but it would be spiced up with fentanyl. And then the way you do that is that you could just then rip people off by having normal Vicodins and say that is, it's kind of like back in the day where if you knew some weed dealer where every strand of weed was kind bud, there was no Reggie's, it was all kind bud, but it was like most of it was Reggie's. It'd be stuff like that. It's just all these different ways to sell drugs, but it is so incredibly dangerous. And, I know I sound like me sounding like some mom here or some DARE program or PSA, but it is just, it's insane to me to think about these people that are, most of these middlemen, most of these drug dealers are just addicts themselves. They're just selling just to be able to afford their own drug. And they're just putting this stuff together, and just people are dropping like flies. I think opiate overdose has overtook from the demographic from, I think it's from like 15 to 29. It is now the number one killer of the age group of males in that age. Because one, that may sound crazy, but 15 to 29-year-old males don't die very often. So you have to consider that. But for that to be like the number one cause, it's at least in the top 3, is just insane. And I think about my friends that just died these horrible deaths, just on their bathroom floor, bloated, or in a motel room, just alone. And I at some of the funerals I've been to, because I think about it in my own scenario too, because that's the way we think about things, through the prism of our own experience of that, seeing their mothers having to bury their sons, and it's awful. So when I saw this friend, I was glad, he was safe. I was glad, he was seeking help. It sucked that he relapsed, but it was awesome that he had 9 years clean. But it just brought me back to just, sometimes I joke around. I talk with my like my grandma, and I'm just like, man, I feel like I know as many dead friends as you do, except, I don't say this part, but it's like you're elderly, you just naturally will know a lot of people that have died. I know quite a few, more than the average person should, but it brought me back to that. I remember all those guys, and then when fentanyl started to arise, the monster it is just started taking lives, and it's not stopping anytime soon. So anyway, Happy New Year. I don't know. I felt compelled to make this video. I added some monetization things where you can give like a super thanks, or I did add tiers, and this is something I didn't just throw together. I added sort of tiers, not tiers, but TIERS, where you can just like, it's kind of like a YouTube Patreon thing. I don't know. I'm still figuring it out, obviously, where if you go to one of the peers, you can have direct access to me. Like I normally provide the No Chaser email. I can even, like on the tiers coming up, I can provide my phone number. I would do a video chat with you. You can get direct lines to where if you give me a topic, I will do that topic on the show within reason. So if you want to check those out, if not, if you just want to keep watching, thank you for watching. I really appreciate the support and all the kind words and the discussion that comes in the comment sections underneath these. But other than that, be well, and New Year, new you, or if you're doing great, New Year, same you.